we're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new style, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, May 12th here in Seoul. This is Cheska Deinhong and standing in for Song Yujin. She'll be back with us starting Thursday. Now joining us today is Ki Kim.
Happy Monday!
Happy Monday! Yay! And we have a bright new face this morning. Tae-rin Kim, welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So let me introduce myself.
Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Tae-rin Kim. I work as a freelance broadcaster and content creator as well. And I recently wrote a best-selling book about speaking skills.
Amazing.
So I'm super excited to be here. So starting to join the Gen Z. So as I'm part of a Gen Z, I cannot wait to share my ideas from Gen Z to the show.
And especially that's the voice that we need on the studio because both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Now today is Monday, so we will be starting off the week with topics trending among young people here in South Korea. So today on News Generation, we will be looking at how young people are redefining family, because May is the month of family. Now, there's a term, the more the merrier, applied to many Korean families in the past, but that actually seems to be changing in recent years. So before we start, since we have a Gen Z representative joining us today, I do want to do a quick survey amongst our panelists. Now, Ki, I know you are raising one young son, so you already have a very small family to start with, right? What about you, Tae-rin? What is your family structure like? Yeah.
Right now, I live with my parents, so we're a three-person household. Actually, I am only one child in my family, but most of my friends is like four-person households, like two parents and two kids. But recently, as you know, it's not always the case anymore. Actually, what I see most these days is people living alone. And a lot of my friends rent one-room places and they live by themselves. So some even got married, but it's kind of rare in my circle. So honestly, but that's not a surprising because people's marriage age is becoming a kind of much later and later.
People are choosing to marry much later, or sometimes not even choosing to marry.
Yeah, they are. So one thing I can say clear is the kind of typical kind of family does not really exist anymore.
Oh, Tae-rin, that's a great segue to today's topic because I think what was considered typical in Korea was that we've long had the so-called four-member household, so having two parents and two children, as you mentioned, as the kind of the norm. But in recent years, those numbers have been reportedly changing, and this is precisely what we're going to discuss today. So could you elaborate on this for us, Keith?
Sure. So according to Statistics Korea, about 20 years ago, households with four members made up 20%, 30% over, and were the majority. However, recent statistics show that single-person households now accounted for 35%, making them the most common, while four-person households have dropped to just 13%. Now that is according to Statistics Korea and recent family member status for each household. And now looking back into 2000, four-person households accounted for the most with 31%. Households with five or more people accounted for 14%, while single-person households only accounted for 15% back then. When the current millennial generation was young, the government's population control policy led most families to have only two children, and we sort of had a male-oriented society. So back then, I remember the slogan, "Don't differentiate boys or girls.
Exactly.
Just have one and raise them well."
Right.
And I also, before I got married, was a typical four-member family with my parents and a younger sister. So for example, families featured in textbooks or reflected in government policies were typically four-person households, but as time have changed, family structures are definitely changing.
And I can definitely speak for my family as well, and I think this applies to a lot of Korean families. My grandparents had 5 children. My parents had 3 children.
Wow.
And now, as Teddy mentioned and Ki mentioned, I mean, you have a one young son. I think 3 or 4 is becoming more typical, and even less, like having 3 or even less than 3. So Teddy, as Ki shared in the statistics, the numbers have been changing, but I think that also has an effect on how we define family as well, the definition of family itself.
Yeah, definitely. So as you can see, earlier in this year, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety reported that for the first time, the three-person household outnumber those with four or more people. So why is this happening? I think many couples are now choosing to have only one child these days. And as people get married and have children later in this life, having a second child feels like a huge burden and challenge. And government policies are also changing to reflect this kind of social atmosphere. So this change is closely linked to the rising average age of first marriage among women in Korea especially, which has been steadily increasing over the years, as you can see. So since people are getting married later, they don't have as much time to raise two or more kids. A parent in his 40s mentioned that by the time his son reaches military age, he'll be nearing retirement.
Wow.
Yeah. He felt he couldn't afford a second child because especially later in his life, raising kids in Korea is super expensive, as you know. So, and both parents often work full-time in these days, and taking a break to raise children is kind of being really risky. So many people feel that one child is already enough. And therefore, the benefit that were once for families with three or more children are now available with just two. It's okay for them.
Right, and you can already tell when the government makes a policy, I think that is like a good indicator to how the society is changing, right?
Sure.
So as the traditional four-member household is declining, we're not just witnessing a shift in numbers, as Ki mentioned, but I think in meaning as well. And I think we can all agree, here in Korean society, we're very much rooted in Confucian ideals. So in the past, when we have like family celebrations or like national holidays, you would have families that go back generations, right?
Exactly.
Fifth generation, eighth generation, we call it like 오촌.
사돈의 팔촌 or different things.
Exactly, and they all come and they're considered extended entire family. Now, which was very wide here in South Korea in the past, but now we're also seeing a bit of changes in that area too. So how are perceptions of family also changing in South Korea?
So we're witnessing a significant shift in how the younger generation, especially MZers, are perceiving the family. The traditional notion of the family must be defined strictly through marriage or blood relations is gradually fading. So in fact, a recent survey revealed that 7 out of 10 MZers respondents believe that simply living together can be qualifying quality as being a family. So this is noteworthy changing because especially in a country like Korea where bloodline and marriage and formal ties have long been a criteria and central to the social fabric. Reflecting this evolving perspective, a bill was introduced in 2023 aiming to legally recognize cohabiting partners who are not bound by marriage or blood. However, due to ongoing tension with more traditional values, of course, that legislation has yet to be enacted. The reason behind this phenomenon is not because they don't appreciate the traditional family value, but sometimes those MZers feel unfair or even feel discriminated by the term family boundary.
Oh, I think that last point is really interesting, and that might be some, I guess, more psychological or maybe social reasons behind why the MZs are trying to.
There's even
consider
cases
family.
where some celebrities suffered from those cases. I guess that kind of reflected on them as well.
Gotcha. And you're trying to create your own family in that way as well. And I think that also affects how we define family as well, the definition of family.
Yeah, sure. So one interesting study I saw is that the younger you are, more narrow your view of the family definitions tends to be. So, for example, most people in their 20s only consider their immediate family, like parents, children, spouses, and siblings as their real kind of family. But for people in their 60s and older, they consider the definition of the family much more broader. So they often include extended relative, as you mentioned, so both blood and by marriage too, as part of their family. So take step-parents, for instance, only 46% of the people in their 20s said they would consider a step-parents as their family. But compared to over 80% among people in their 60s. So this kind of differences and disparities may be partly because younger individuals are less likely to have children-in-law or in-laws or grandchildren at their stage of life. Because like me, as a result, so
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to have grandchildren
yeah,
at this age.
it is. It is natural thing. So as a result, their personal experiences with extended family is kind of really limited like me. So it can contribute to the more narrow definition of the family, I think. Additionally, younger generations often define family based on who they live with or who they have a close relationship with. So it is not about just solely on blood or legal ties. So I can say the perspective can lead a more narrow view of the family, focusing mainly on just the immediate household members.
And I think this is something that is definitely happening not just in Korea, but also globally. So we were very curious to hear from our viewers. So we were open to hearing from our viewers as always. So we did a survey on our Arirang News YouTube channel from May 1st to 7th. And the question we asked was, quote, what defines a family? And here are the results. So out of 327 votes, 63% said emotional bond, and 27% said bloodline or marriage, and 6% said living together, and 4% other. So this reflects the high rate of emotional bond and how we consider family in that way. And here are 3 comments from the viewers. Benny D97 said, for me, an emotional bond makes a strong family that we build. And Jacques Parping 3217 said marriage, as it is both a sacrament and a definitive anthropological rite of passage in any civilization. That is quite eloquently put. And Never Ever X7C said all of the above. Now, thank you to all our viewers for their insight. Now, up next, we'll connect live with a young person from Germany who will provide us with a more global perspective on the topic we just discussed. Join us after the break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Today we're joined by Alisa Duda, a German currently living in Seoul, Korea. Hello, Alisa.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about your family structure? I mean, you heard the topic that we discussed today, because in Korea, a 4-member household used to be the norm, and that seems to be changing. So what is a typical family structure in your home country?
So first of all, I live in a single household right now in Seoul with my dog, actually. So it's not really a single household. And in Germany, my family style is actually something special already, because I come from a patchwork family in multiple generations, actually. So my parents separated and then found new partners. So I have both a stepmother and stepfather, and also step siblings, and also brother-in-laws. So it's very confusing if people ask me, oh, how many brothers and sisters do you have?
So you actually have an extended family in that way.
In that way, yes. So in Germany, the traditional family structure is the same. So 4 people, and what is especially notable, it's not 2 parents, it's a man and a woman, and mostly a girl and a boy, right? So that's the ideal family structure in the traditional sense. However, these days there are other structures, for example, single-parent households, or LGBTQ, so same-sex households, or couples without children. Right.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights. So do you think the way we define family is also changing? And how do you, Alyssa, define family in your home country, Germany?
I think how I define family is a little bit different from what is the typical German way, so I'll start with that. So the traditional way is the 4-person household and a slightly extended family, so grandparents, uncles, aunts, and first-degree cousins. So unlike Korea, we don't consider extended family. So if I meet my 3rd-degree cousin, it's a random person for me. It's not my family. And as I grew older, I was taught that family is actually a choice. So I can choose who I consider family and who I want to be part of my life or later my children's life. So if I don't feel like a person is a good influence or I don't get along with a person, I don't have to consider them family. I don't have to invite them to my wedding or my birthday or something like this.
Yeah,
And yes, I think
Yeah.
it changed again. So nowadays, I think family is defined a little bit differently. So it doesn't have to be a person you're related to by blood, but you can choose freely. So this includes, for example, life partners that are people you don't have a romantic relationship with. So one step above the best friend, or for example, multiple single parents that decide to live together and raise their children together, or communal living, which is getting more popular in the I think left bubble. So people that have a very liberal mindset, they will say they want to live with same-minded people together and buy a small village or farm together, and even though they don't know each other, they will become a family because they have the same mindset.
Definitely, it's diversifying a lot. Jenny, could you ask the last question, please?
Yeah, thank you for your interesting points. So, Alyssa, what do you think is the driving the change in the family structure and family definition?
So I think the most driving point is self-determination. So nowadays there are more equal rights than before for women. So women can get education and can lead self-determined lives, but also, for example, LGBTQ people can choose their partners more freely, which leads to different structures than before. And also the fact that in Germany, at least, you don't have to stay with a partner anymore, even after having children. It doesn't have as high of societal repercussions anymore. So if you are unhappy with a marriage, you can still decide to leave or remarry.
Thank you, Alyssa. Actually, I think you provided us with some great insight into the global perspective on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alyssa mentioned some really interesting points, like how family can be a choice, and there are some self-determination in our generation that becomes a reason for it. So let's quickly talk about the possible driving forces behind the changes in family structure. Now, is it really a matter of like preference? Are we just choosing to do it? Or perhaps is there something deeper that tells us about the structure that's changing as a whole?
Sure. The shift toward nuclear family is a global trend now, as you just saw, not just in Korea. So this sensation has emerged alongside industrialization, urbanization. In fact, single-person households now make up more than 50% in some countries around the world, and urban living plays a major role in the shift. Limited housing space in cities tends to favor smaller household units, so it makes nuclear families more practical than extended one. And top of that, the growing influence of individualism, along with rising rates of non-marriage or non-childbearing, is accelerating this sort of transformation.
And what about you, Chetty? What do you think are some of the driving forces behind it? I mean, this is definitely a personal choice, but I think there could be some social repercussions or downside to it as well.
Yeah, there are. And I think the rise of the nuclear family and the one-person household has brought some kind of positive changes too. Like people are more becoming independent. And they don't
making
have
their own choices.
Yeah, and they have less responsibility to take care of their extended family members. It was a huge burden before. So, but there is still a downside of it. Living alone can make people more vulnerable. Especially when it comes to care and support for the individuals. I think many one-person households fall through the cracks of our social safety nets. So they're also more likely to experience poverty. I saw some kind of study that showed that single-person household is less than half of the national average in the respect of the average income. So they said, so while smaller families may offer our independence and more freedom for us, but at the same time, they can also lead to a greater social isolation and financial burden too.
I think, Chetan, you definitely balanced out the discussion that we are doing. There are definitely positives, and it is a personal choice to create family in the way that we want. But I think there's a lot of things to consider. So ending off, very briefly, what are your thoughts on how the society could work alongside this change in smaller, or even, maybe not even getting married, but structural changes or nuclear family that is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller?
Well, I don't think there's a clear answer to this, but just going back, we just have to really think about the root of the family. The term family in English comes from the Latin root called familia, which is parents and children, all the properties is included. And Korean term 가족 also comes from Chinese letter, which means a group of family who share the same last name, you know, in the same household. So I think if we really have to go back to the root of what family really means, then we can think about the government policy and the societal change. So, and be a responsible member of the family as well.
That is a great way to put it. Always go back to the beginning to figure it out. What about you, Cherin? What do you think?
I think that's true that society is changing a lot. However, I think the most important thing is we should not just adjust to the change. We should make a change and improve the circumstances. That's the point. So I think, as everyone knows, low birth rate and declining of the population in Korea is a huge burden of the economic side. So instead of adjusting to the change, we should improve this kind of situations. So I think the government is making a great first stride, like they're implementing a lot of new policies to support a flexible married couples. However, I think we should need more in company side help. Like I found that my friend is experiencing a 2 years maternity leave, and it was really good experience for her. So I think it can directly link to the childbirth rate rising. So I think this kind of corporate side cooperation is needed. So I can finally say it's only then we'll start seeing increased childbirth.
I actually agree, because family is definitely a personal choice, but when there are circumstances that can't support making our personal choices, then we have to sacrifice some of our choices to meet with what the society is guiding us. So in that way, I do hope that family, everyone that is watching us, has a family that can be a fundamental base for the society and their happiness. And that's all we have for today, but NewsGen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korean time. Now, special thanks today to Ki Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Cherin Kim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.